Let's look at something called the nested loop. Essentially, it is just a loop within another loop. So in this lecture, we are going to use nested loops to create something simple. I want to print this. Look at the comments here. The numbers 0, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 2, 3, 4. We're going to do that, and in the process, it should be clear how nested loop works. Our learning objectives: understand what is a nested loop, print a 3 by 3 array, also known as a data table, and comment out the outputs. And the output is equals to the row number plus column number. I know we haven't talked about what are arrays yet, but for now, essentially, think of them as data tables. Just imagine it is a 3 by 3 table of data, and this data is stored behind the scenes. So after we create the table and populate the table with information, we can't see it, but it is there, and we can use command to draw out the contents of this table. We declare this table a 3 by 3 data table, and note that the row number and column number starts from 0. So we have 3 rows, row 0, row 1, and row 2, 3 columns, column 0, column 1, and column 2. So right now, I will use 2 for loops to input data into our data table. I will suggest you take 10 seconds and try to understand how this part works. I would suggest you think about it in the same way as how the meta editor will read it. Go through the first loop and then fall into the second loop and do this. Take your time. Pause the video if you have to. Okay, welcome back. Let's go through this portion. So essentially, our first loop on the outside loops through every row. Our second loop loops through every column. So we are going to read it the same way meta editor will read it. We start from row 0, and once we are at row 0, we go to column 0. So data table, row 0, column 0, essentially this refers to the top left input, will be 0 plus 0. We go to the next loop in the inner loop. Remember, we are still in the inner loop. We haven't moved on from the outer loop yet. So we are still at row 0, but now at column 1. So data table 0, 1 equals to 0 plus 1. And then one more time in the inner loop, column equals 2. So data table equals to 0, 2 equals to 0 plus 2, which is 2. Therefore, we get 0, 1, 2 for the first row. Only once the inner loop is done will the outer loop move on to the next step. So now we are at row equals to 1. Then repeat everything in the inner loop. Column equals 0 again, so data table 1, 0 equals to 1 plus 0. Then inner loop run again, column equals to 1, data table 1, 1 equals to 1 plus 1, and so on. And the last element, the bottom right hand corner, will be when row equals to 2 and column equals to 2. So data table 2, 2 equals to 2 plus 2, which is 4. Once both loops are done, we use command to print out each element manually one by one. Backward N refers to next line. Alright, so once you have done that, you will get an output like this. Before we go, I want to point out that in a nested loop, you can have more than 2 loops. You can have 3 loops or more. But I would recommend that you do not have more than 3 loops in a nested loop, because it will become unnecessarily complex and it will really be difficult for you or other coders looking at your work to manage and modify the code.